Hello, everybody, and welcome into Commodity Culture, where we break down commodities markets, sound money principles, and geopolitics, all with the goal of making you a better investor in the commodities sector. My name is Jesse Day, and today is November 14th, 2025. And on this episode, I'm excited to welcome Dr. Mark Thornton to the program, an Austrian economist, senior fellow at the Mises Institute, author, and the host of the Minor Issues podcast. Dr. Thornton thinks silver still has a long way to run as tailwinds continue to build for the metal, including increasing industrial demand, its new critical mineral status in the United States, and a host of other factors we dive into in this interview. Dr. Thornton also believes that not only is a return to a gold standard possible, it's inevitable, as hands will eventually be forced to jump ship from our fiat-based currency system as untenable debt obligations unwind and the threat of hyperinflation looms large. All of this and so much more ahead, so strap yourselves in for my conversation with Dr. Mark Thornton. Dr. Mark Thornton, it is great to have you on Commodity Culture. I want to kick things off with silver, as the metal recently hit new nominal all-time highs and continues to show exceptional strength over $50 an ounce. What do you think are the main catalysts driving the silver market? And do you think we're closer to the beginning or the end of this bull cycle for the metal?
Well, I think what we've seen in the short run is growing pains in this marketplace. We were a market that was being sustained on the demand side by silver stackers and, industrial users and that kind of thing, which is very stable. And then as silver moved up recently, a lot of traders and institutional players got involved. And of course, they're much more short run oriented. And so we've seen a great deal of volatility in the market and a little bit of chaos in the wholesale markets. And so that's what's been going on, I think, in the short run. But the silver market on the demand side is divided up between the industrial demanders and the investment demanders, which would also include jewelry. People who buy and hold, and the industry demands are also relatively stable. So it's that marginal player that's really had a big impact. And in the longer run, however, I think there's some very important factors that come into play here, and specifically the fact that on the supply side, 70% of new silver entering the market comes in as a byproduct of industrial mining. And so that supply is inelastic or relatively insensitive to price. And so this is why we see a lot of gyrations of silver prices around the general trend in gold prices, because the market for new silver on the supply side is relatively inelastic, and that can affect us in both directions. If there's a big expansion of industrial metal production, then you're going to get extra silver production entering the market. And likewise, if you get a big contraction in industrial metals, well, that's going to contract silver production, even if the price is going up. My expectations are that we've seen a huge multi-decade increase in industrial metals and high industrial metal prices, which have pushed a lot of silver production into the market since the early 2000s. And so that's kept silver prices relatively low. And if there's a big calamity in the economy and there's a big cutback in real estate production, construction, and infrastructure spending worldwide, China, India, and so forth, that could spell very tight supplies from byproduct production. And so you might see a big zoom up in the price of silver.
You discussed silver in a recent episode of the Minor Issues podcast, where you asked, is silver manipulated or are the fundamentals doing the work? I've had a lot of guests come on the show discussing how silver prices are managed by bullion banks and other big players. Is there validity to these claims in your view? And if so, how much does manipulation impact the silver market?
Yes. I think that, the byproduct production issue is definitely a tremendous catalyst. And, the market there's a lot of people who suspect manipulation of the price of silver in the economy, in the silver market. It's controlled at the wholesale level by a very few players, a very few number of bullion bankers, and so they have a very tight control on it. But I haven't seen any kind of institutional control that would account for the fact that silver prices, relative to all other industrial metals, have been very, very low, including the price of gold for that matter. And so I think that the longer run factors are real factors. And, the bullion banks do manage the price of silver. They do escort the silver production from the mines into the marketplace. And so naturally they're financing that movement from the mines to the fabricators and so forth. And so it's quite natural that they, in effect, are selling silver into the market, into the futures market. So that's a pretty normal part of their business. Now, of course, they've been caught doing illicit things in that process, and it's a rather dark part of the market, and so they can, in a sense, get away with manipulation in the short run. Especially, they can sell extra future contracts into the future, and so I think that they do control, they do manage this market, and they can manipulate this market. But in the longer run, I think we have to look at real factors, and the fact that basic supply and demand is going to rule out manipulation of any price in the long run, unless the government basically has a tight control on things, and unless they give monopoly power to certain firms, there's no way that anybody can control market prices over the long haul.
What are your thoughts on silver being added officially now to the U.S. critical minerals list? Is this a bullish tailwind? Because we've been getting a lot of noise on social media since this has happened. How do you think this could impact the silver market?
Oh, yes. I mean, that's definitely going to contribute tailwinds, as you say, increased demand. It's going to mean that the government is going to re-stockpile. I mean, the United States always had a stockpile of silver for war and for coinage. And we disgorged ourselves of a lot of our wartime stockpiles decades ago. And so this represents a re-stockpiling of government hoards and also other policies which will contribute to domestic production, domestic consumption, and domestic storage of the metal. So silver is a very, very valuable metal. It's really the only metal that will do in a lot of applications, especially with alternative energy, all kinds of electronics, artificial intelligence, and computing technology. And so it really is a strategic metal. It really is a very important metal. And the fact that the government is maybe opening the way forward, helping to open up new mining in the United States and stockpiling and other policies that might increase demand, I think that that's going to represent the same type of tailwind on a lesser scale than what the central banks are doing for the market for gold, where they're setting aside, they're buying current production and setting it aside as a reserve asset.
Turning to the gold market now, it's much the same story as silver, an incredible run to new all-time highs, fundamentals that look to only be growing stronger. And so I'll ask the same question here. Why has gold gone on such a tremendous run recently, and how much farther do you think it could climb?
Well, there are important differences between the market for gold and the market for silver. There's no doubt about that. And that accounts for example, the gyrations in the gold silver ratio, which I pay very close attention to and which has fallen over the last year from over 100 down into the low 80s. And I expect that to fall even more. But setting those differences aside and looking primarily at the market for gold, I've analyzed the market for gold in a theoretical way for a free market economy. And what you find in a free market economy devoid of government intervention into gold and money and so forth is that the price of gold is incredibly stable. And if we look at history, we find that when the government wasn't involved, that the price or purchasing power of gold was almost constant over long periods of time. So when we turn our attention to gyrations in gold prices, our first and foremost thing to look at is government intervention. And so government intervention in the current gold market is significant. I mean, they're inflating the fiat currency. They're creating international disturbances across the globe, creating uncertainty. And of course, then there's central bank buying, where central banks around the world, large and small, have been accumulating gold reserves and buying up a large part of the new gold supply. And so I think the really the foundation of the upward movement in gold prices has been central bank buying. But if you look at the other aspects of demand for investors and so forth, they're concerned about what government is doing in terms of inflating the fiat currency, borrowing and spending beyond belief. I mean, it's a runaway process right now where governments are not jogging, they're sprinting in terms of spending and going into debt on an enormous scale. And that's what's the uncertainty that generates is creating a market for gold by private investors, which we've seen in recent months, where private investors are looking at the outlook in the economy presented by the political class, and they're saying, hey, I don't want to be in the dollar. I don't want to be in government bonds. I need to at least diversify into precious metals right now because of the great uncertainty. So it's all this price movement, of course, is not a natural feature of things of the free market. It's all government driven.
The sponsor of today's episode is ARC Silver Gold Osmium. Owner Ian Everard is praised even by his competitors as one of the most honest and level-headed bullion dealers in the United States. They have some great prices. You can see some of them displayed right now on screen. Take advantage of these specials today by reaching out to Ian at 307-264-9441 or by email at ian@arcsgo.com. Make sure to tell him, of course, that Commodity Culture sent you. And now, back to the interview. Very interesting. I want to get into government debt and deficits in a little while. But first, I want to ask a question I've been pondering for some time now, and that is what appears to be the complete degradation of morals in modern society and its potential connection to the fiat currency system we live under. Because from my view, I'm seeing a big rise in narcissistic behavior, nihilism, indifference to human suffering, and short-term thinking that seems to be strongly reflected in the political leaders of today. Are you seeing the same things? And if so, is fiat currency partly to blame, and could sound money remedy some of these issues?
Oh, yes. The connection between moral degeneration and fiat currency is direct. And I think that, Austrian economics that we espouse here at the Mises Institute is not a siloed type of economics. All of the major problems that exist in the world today, the topics that everybody wants to have explained to them, are treated by mainstream economists as a one-off thing. They're a health economist or an econometrician or a public finance specialist, and they jump from topic to topic with different types of analysis and generating different, statistical results. In Austrian economics, all of these issues are really come down to one thing, and that's fiat money. And as a matter of fact, in next week's episode of the Minor Issues podcast, I'm going to show step by step how all 7 of our major problems are really generated primarily through, as a result of fiat money in the economy. So there's a direct relationship in our minds between this moral degeneration and fiat money, monetary inflation, zero interest rates in the economy. This creates what we call in Austrian economics high time preference on the part of individuals, where they're not interested in saving and investing and building for the future. They're only interested in consuming what's good for me right now, and not really caring about the larger picture of life, basically. They're only interested in consumption. And so this leads to degeneration rather than a process of building and proliferation for the future. As a matter of fact, the last several summers, we've had a student researcher here, Jeffrey Dagner, who's now a PhD in economics. He's actually the dean of a business now where he teaches, and he completed his PhD, and his work was on the impact of fiat money on the family. And he just came out with a new book on this subject about monetary inflation and the family. And so we make a very direct relationship between the printing press and what it does to price inflation and the ability to save and the encouragement it creates for consumption. If your money is depreciating and you can't save the money, you're going to consume it. And then that's going to become a habit. And that kind of habit is not natural in a free market economy, and it leads to degeneration. And so, and as a matter of fact, we have one of our senior scholars, Professor Guido Holzmann, just came out with a book on charities and generosity and abundance in the free market economy and how the state negatively impacts all of those natural impulses in society. So we don't silo these things away into separate categories. It's a process, and fiat money creates this process of degeneration of what we think of as morals in society.
Well, much in line with my previous question is the acceptance of taking on impossible to pay back debt and printing currency as a means of growing economies and expanding government power. This causes a trickle-down effect for citizens that drives inflation and leads to all these problems which you've just outlined. It's made living unaffordable for your average person as well. It's getting worse and worse. From your standpoint, is this system at risk of collapsing? Because there's a lot of hyperbole surrounding the fiat currency system. Some people come on and say, we don't have much time left. This whole thing's going to collapse. Other people say, well, the government can really kick this can down the road much, much longer than people imagine. What is your stance there?
Well, we don't know how long the government can kick this can down the road. Things like war and hyperinflation, they can come on a society all at once without any forewarning. So the length of time between now and the ultimate meltdown in society is unknown. And, the idea of kicking the can down the road, that's exactly what politicians want. That's exactly what the power elites want, because the kicking the can down the road is to their benefit. They actually benefit from that process. they're the ones that are engorging themselves at the expense of society. The working class is not helped at all by this kicking of the can down the road business whatsoever. And certainly, most importantly, in my considerations, I mean, in addition to working at the Mises Institute, well, I work with students all the time at the Mises Institute. That's our primary uh, consumer, but I also teach at Auburn University. So I'm dealing with young people all the time, and they're really worried about things like being able to form a family, being able to buy a house, starting a career. They're not being helped by this kicking of the can down the road whatsoever, which keeps housing prices exorbitant, which has caused the price of education to become exorbitant, has led to the buildup of trillions of dollars in student debt. And so, the working class is not helped. The young people are not helped. It's the politicians and the political elites that are being helped. So I view, this kicking of the can down the road as really the immoral choice. And so that's obviously a tough choice to make. It means catastrophic type changes that have to take place in order to stop kicking the can down the road. But it's been done before; it'll be done again. And so I think that is, all things considered, the moral choice to make. And we've also seen economies that stop the kicking of the can down the road and deal with the problems. I mean, it's my generation that has incurred all of this horrendous debt, which we have benefited from. I mean, the spending has been on us, and so, but countries which reverse that policy and accept the choices that we've made and own up to them, you can revitalize an economy very quickly, because you'll remove tremendous amounts of uncertainty, you'll remove tremendous amounts of debt on the future, and as a result, you'll have a new starting point in which the economy can grow very quickly, and which opportunity will be forthcoming for many, many more people in terms of jobs and in terms of the ability to buy houses and start careers and start businesses. I mean, who wants to start a business in a country with $38 trillion of debt, with new trillions being added all the time? I mean, it's a daunting situation that we're in.
Yes, very much the same story in my home country of Canada. The government will also just regulate you and tax you to death as well. So very hostile environment for people trying to be entrepreneurs. Do you think we could ever see gold or even silver return to the global monetary system in some form or another, whether through, there's been talk of gold-backed bonds, there's been talk about gold-backed tokens on the blockchain. There's been talk of gold being used as a means of transacting international trade for BRICS member nations. Obviously, a return to a full-on gold standard would perhaps be the superior choice, but that would be very difficult, I believe, to implement, or maybe not. Do you think it's a possibility? And if so, how could it be done?
Yes, I've thought about this question quite a bit. And I not only think it can be done, I think it will be done. I think there are forces currently existing that's going to force the hand of the world to get back onto gold and a sounder monetary system. I think individuals out there right now are putting themselves on a precious metal standard by putting all of their savings, their savings account money into silver, or the longer term investment money into owning precious metals, owning gold, and central banks. Even central banks are catching on to this situation that we're in. So central banks in the BRIC countries, are moving towards a gold standard. The number one reserve asset in the world now is return to gold. Stock market investors, after a big crash in the stock market. They're going to be sold on gold, I think. And if we have a hyperinflation, of course, where prices are increasing so fast that we can barely keep up with it, well, people are going to start to go using barter for certain situations, maybe using their constitutional junk silver to make exchanges in the economy. With Bitcoin, the potential for a big Bitcoin and crypto crash in the economy, I think Gen Z and the millennials are going to be sold on a kryptonized gold or kryptonized silver instrument, and with the fall in the dollar, I think that comes along with hyperinflation. I think you're going to see people in third world countries which have relied on the dollar as an alternative currency, they're going to jump ship. I think the people in the underground black market economy that have relied on the dollar as a currency, they're going to jump ship. So I think in many, many ways, the world is moving, and we can see forward that movement is going to continue away from the dollar, away from fiat currencies, and towards more commodity-based monetary systems.
You debated in opposition to the war on drugs at Oxford Union back in 2014. Are you surprised to see this issue crop up again with the Trump administration seeming to be indiscriminately murdering alleged drug traffickers in Venezuela and talks of a potential military campaign against that country? Renaming the Department of Defense to Department of War is just completely insane. But Pete Hegseth, who runs that department, has recently been posting on social media that they're doing a big operation coming up, which seems to allude that perhaps Venezuela will be one of the targets. Of course, we also saw the tariff threats against Mexico and Canada, which Trump based on them allowing fentanyl to come into the country. Is there any validity to these claims in your view? Are there ulterior motives? What's going on with Venezuela? How do you view this whole situation?
Well, I'm very concerned about fentanyl, and that my work on the war on drugs pointed to the development of something along the lines of a chemical like fentanyl coming in and killing mass numbers of people. That was what I did my dissertation on many years ago, and I've been writing about it. I've been writing and speaking about the dangers of fentanyl. So that is very real, and it's been killing tens and tens of thousands of Americans every single year. And so that's very real. However, I think that the Trump administration's use of that as a tool in the trade war is really disconnected. I hope it does have an effect on reducing deaths in, due to fentanyl. But I think that that's a political sidebar, essentially. And I think the whole Venezuela thing is really all made up. I mean, these little teeny boats that are the size of a fishing boat, and we're going in with $1 billion, armament to kill those people. That's a sideshow. That's staged activity. And, it's pretty clear that is really setting the American people up for an election year show, a staged show, a show of force, where the United States goes into a country like Venezuela, which is breaking down from the ill effects of socialism as we speak. I mean, the country is on its back. It's having a hard time producing oil products like gasoline, even though it has the largest oil reserves in the world. It used to be a very wealthy country until socialism got its hooks into it, and socialism has killed Venezuela. Millions of people have left the country because of socialism, and I abhor all of that. But the idea of military intervention, I think, is not designed. I mean, it may be designed to help our government get our oil companies' hands on Venezuelan oil, but it's not to solve the fentanyl problem. I can guarantee you that. I think we're being set up right now for Venezuela to be a 2026 election year show to try to boost the gains or boost the vote totals. In this case, for Republicans, Democrats have used the same tactic in the past, so it's not unique to this administration.
Well, let's talk about war, because there's been a lot of that currently either taking place or threatening to start. Of course, Russia, Ukraine, many believe that is a proxy war between Russia and NATO. Israel, Palestine, which has a tentative ceasefire, but that does not look like it's actually holding up. Then there's the aforementioned Venezuelan situation, which risks descending into a hot war. We have the Trump administration threatening to put boots on the ground in Nigeria now, the potential for the US and Israel to start a full-scale war with Iran. China, Taiwan is something people are talking about. US versus China. I mean, the list just goes on. I think it's safe to say that none of these wars are happening for the reasons presented to us by the government and mainstream media. Why is global conflict on the rise in your view? And does this situation risk spiraling into a World War III type scenario?
Well, war is a lie, and war is nothing but death and destruction. And conflict is on the rise right now because socialism and government intervention have been on the rise now for many, many years. But it's really peaked itself in recent years with COVID and the aftermath of COVID. We've seen a big rise in governments and in the politicians that lead governments, to be more warlike. And socialism, prides itself on being able to give away goodies to everybody. But of course, you can't give away, socialism can't give away anything to anybody without taking it first from somebody. So it's a give, but it's also a take. And, if you're taking a lot from your domestic economy, you're running down the domestic economy and you're running down the number of people who support the government and who support the politicians. And so socialism and socialist politicians of every ilk end up needing somebody else to exploit. They need to exploit the foreigners in some way or fashion, or at least gain political support with the idea of exploiting foreigners. And henceforth, we have, the trade war and protectionism against the evil foreigners who are undermining America, when in fact, it's socialism in America that's undermining, for example, our industrial base, our production of natural resources. Environmentalism has crippled the American and Canadian ability to produce natural resources. They've crippled the ability of investors to put money into the capital and infrastructure in both Canada and the United States and elsewhere to get those natural resources. And so they've crippled whole aspects of the economy and they've reduced opportunity. And so they're pointing the finger outside the country, and that leads to international conflict. Now, Hitler did the same thing, to his economy. He was a socialist. He ruined the German economy and he wanted to get more land for the German people. Mussolini was the same way. He exploited the domestic economy and therefore Italy had to invade Africa and other places because they needed it and they deserved it. And so they need to exploit foreigners after they've maxed out on the domestic economy. And the trade war is really only a prelude to actual war. And so we've got hot spots throughout the economy. And I like the fact that President Trump, at least wants to claim to be anti-war. And his record is pretty good versus other presidents. But the idea that you can have a trade war without increasing international conflict is just irrational. Mises, the great Austrian economist that the Institute is named after, made precisely that point. He showed that that interventionism in the domestic economy led politicians to want to adopt protectionist policies that results in trade wars and organized trading bloc countries, which we're seeing right now, where countries ally themselves with one another. But that alignment also creates conflict.
Well, I want to discuss some potential solutions to these issues, and I'd love to get your perspective as an Austrian economist. What solutions could the School of Austrian Economics have to our current predicament? And with the political elite willing to fight tooth and nail to protect the current system, which upholds their power, is there any solution other than violent revolution or a collapse of the current political system? Is anything else feasible in your view?
Oh, yes, absolutely. The individual can't take on the power elite themselves, but that's not the proper way. I mean, the proper way is a bottom-up approach, not a top-down approach. So the individual should be concerned with their own situation, building themselves up, adopting their own, gold standard savings plan. Start with protecting yourself and protecting your family and being a good example for others. This requires that a lot of people do this simultaneously throughout the economy. We work primarily with young people at the Mises Institute. We try to instill not just the science of a free market, how the free market works, because you can't just advocate the free market in a cloud. You have to know, some of the scientific details of why a free market works and why it's a fair process and why it's a productive process that lifts all boats. Because the free market is a bottom-up approach. It's not a top-down approach. So people have to know why freedom is a practical good thing. And we have to know exactly why and how government is an intolerable bad thing. And, so it's important for you to lift yourself up and your family and the people around you in an economic sense, but you also have to do it, at least in part, on an intellectual level. You have to learn why freedom is a good thing, scientifically why that gives us good results, and why scientifically, we all know that government produces bad results. I mean, the evidence is clear, but you have to know why so you can explain it to others and be a good example in your community.
That's a great answer. Tell us about your work at the Mises Institute, your books, the Minor Issues podcast, and anywhere else you'd like to direct people who want to follow your work.
Well, I've been had the very good fortune of an accidental fortune, really, to be working with Lew Rockwell in the Mises Institute now for 42 years. And it's been, back in 42 years ago, things looked intolerably bad across the economy. And also, intellectually, things were incredibly bad. There were so few people who had even heard of Austrian economics at all. And the gold standard was simply laughed off of any conversation that it was brought up in. So we've made tremendous progress. There are millions and millions and millions of people who have heard of Austrian economics because of Lew Rockwell and the Mises Institute, the work of Ron Paul, and many, many others, people who have propounded the Austrian school for its economic virtues and its ethical virtues. And of course, we specialize in dealing and educating the youth, but really all populations. My Minor Issues podcast, which is just a 10-minute economic podcast, is one of 6 different podcasts that we offer. And everything on our site is available for free. to download. We have books and so forth. As a matter of fact, right now we're giving away free copies of this book that is F.A. Hayek's greatest hits articles. And so if you put Hayek in the comments to this podcast episode, I'll send you the link and you can get a free copy either to download, or we'll send you hard copies of the book. So we're all in the business of trying to teach the world, and our website is, digested around the world. So I encourage, everybody to get involved and get more knowledgeable about free markets and about Austrian economics. And if you want to get more involved, if you want to, donate some appreciated precious metals at the year end for a possible tax deduction, just put Mises in the comments and I'll send you the link to that, because there's a lot of different ways in which every individual can help out, can grow individually, but also can help out the general movement, because obviously we got our backs against the wall right now. But I see the way forward as both a great adventure and a winnable battle, because our ideas are more powerful. And I think that they can defeat, as they have in the past, the forces of big government and socialism.
Fantastic. Well, Dr. Thornton, this has been a great conversation. I'm going to put links to everything you discussed in the description below. Thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your knowledge with the audience.
Thank you very much, Jesse. It was great.
Thank you for joining us. Today's sponsor, ARC Silver Gold Osmium, has some great prices on gold and silver bullion products. They are on screen right now. All of these are while supplies last, so make sure to reach out to owner Ian Everard today at 307-264-9441 or by email at ian@arcsgo.com, and make sure to tell him that Commodity Culture sent you and pick up your Commodity Culture merch. Support the show in style, everything backed by a 100% quality guarantee. Link is in the description below, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Commodity Culture is a series on commodities and natural resources. If you would like to see more, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you're always up to date with the latest episodes.